The scenographer's role in the theater production. The scenographic artist must decide when the spectacular is needed and when is not appropriate for a given production. Just because the designer has all kinds of capabilities does not mean that all these capabilities should be put into play. Making the production full of spectacle may detract from the production rather than enhance it. The scenery and the special effects are part of a whole and should complement the whole rather than being entities of themselves. The designer must ask the question why before the question how is considered. The scenographer is to serve the actor by providing him or her with a design that is appropriate to the needs of the performance. This design begins with the stage floor. No longer is the stage floor just a common floor. It is now being designed in such a way that acting areas are developed by fracturing, extending, raising, lowering, and angling it in various combinations to provide the greatest potential acting area in a given space. The general background is the scenographic artist's next consideration. The scenographer must always be aware of the relationship of the background to the performer and its impact on the audience. It is an area that does require careful consideration. The visual artist is expected to look at the world through not only the character's eyes, but also to look at it through their memories and past experiences. The designer must provide functional design as well as expression of the drama. In determining furniture and set properties, the designer must consider several important elements. The first is developing an awareness of periods in which the furniture was created, as well as the relationship of differing time periods to one another. He must be familiar with styles that fall within time periods and how this style influenced other periods. Third, he must know the technology used and the basic construction of certain pieces. Fourth, he must know the materials that were used during the time period and why it was preferred. Another item is a vast knowledge of finishing materials as well as understanding of how time and use affect the item and its finish. He or she must consider the history behind the piece because it will reveal truths about the period in which it existed. The director and scenographer's relationship. The role of the scenographer to the director has changed philosophically. It used to be that one person had to be in charge of the production, which created the all-powerful director. However, the scenographer's role has emerged parallel to the director by being his artistic and visual eye. Good theater is made from the collaboration of both the director and the scene designer. Both the director and the scene designer have the responsibility of reading, analyzing, and interpreting the text, initiating research, assimilating and assessing that research, planning the concrete, giving instructions to their groups, and observing and refining the production. By bringing both artists' concepts to the table and discussing them, the production has a better chance of being a true work of art. The designer of stage space must realize that movements have meanings that are the result of patterns of actions, both metaphysical, in the mind of the conceiver, and in the understanding of the provider. Beyond this, directing himself while not forgetting that empty space is not really empty space, but rather only unoccupied for the moment. The scenographer must consider both the total amount of space needed and the precise shapes determined as virtual volume. Scenography is really an extension of the direction process and must take in consideration the following physical elements: floor patterns and level change, objects used in action or production, barriers that restrict and direct, and scenic elements that have a virtual influence on the audience but not on the performer. A fifth element is the use of light. The stage is not just where anything can happen, but where something always does. The scenographer must shape out of time and space the only place where the playwright's world can exist. From decorative art to scenographic art. 1. Radical stage-audience relationships. 2. Three-dimensional and sculpture scenic elements and skeletal forms to free access to backstage instead of flats of confining box sets. 3. Playing areas beyond the proscenium arch. 4. Three-dimensional textures instead of two-dimensional painting effects and the application of new lighter materials such as plastic or foam rubber. 5. Metaphorical and symbolic imagery and design concepts over realistic structures and locales. 6. Simple scenic environments into forms and materials related to abstract qualities in text. 7. more than one focus on stage at one time over linear sequences. 8. Rediscovery of 3D world of theater to have deeper acting areas and elements, more vertical in nature. Therefore, the creative process of theatrical design includes dramatic analysis, creative research, visual and technological research, to a final expressive visual presentation. The scenographer must be a creative artist and a craftsman who has knowledge and experience in both these worlds of visual arts, dramatic arts, and all aspects of the fine and applied arts, in addition to the following artistic and technical obligations. Knowledge of history of architecture and furnishings. 1. Awareness of individual periods of architecture and furnishing. 2. Styles that fall within individual periods and evolution of that style. 3. Basic forms of constructions and technologies used in the manufacture of individual pieces. 4. Materials used during a period. 5. Architecture and finishing materials or specific treatments of individuals to a particular age. 6. Understanding of how time and use affect object and its finishing. Scenographer's artistic and technical obligations. 1. To work within the budget of the production. 2. To work within time available for design and construction. 3. To be aware of skill of the technical staff. 4. To be aware of physical limitations of where productions will be presented. 5. Provide rough and diagrammatic drawings that show intent of elemental visual form. 6. Provide finished scenic sketches with fully accurate visual detail and light considerations. 7. Provide three-dimensional models that show scale representations of what is possible. 8. Provide mechanical working drawings from which design can be realized in scenic shop. 9. Provide examples of visual materials to get accurate colors, textures, forms, or finishes. Theaters and stages. In general, there are several kinds of theater building structures the scenographic designer will more than likely use. They are the arena, thrust, flexible, and proscenium stage. The arena and thrust stages is the most intimate of the actor-audience relationships. The distance between the actors and the audience is equal, while the action is always as close to each individual in the audience as possible. Because movement on the thrust and arena stage is circular, the director must move the actors in two ways to keep the actor-audience relationship equal. The first way is keeping the actors' backs to any one section of the audience to a minimum. The second is that a director must move the actor in a position in which he or she faces the audience and puts the actors in a favorable position to be seen and heard. The action on the open stage is much more visible than the action happening on a proscenium stage, and the space is always more limited, and offstage space is non-existent. Due to these limitations, the scenographer usually arranges the scene in such a way that the central actor is noticed through height and position on stage. The arena and thrust stages are gradually moving into the proscenium stage. No longer does all the action on the proscenium stage take place behind the proscenium line. Rather, acting areas are being extended beyond the curtain line and even out into the auditorium. The most important consideration to be made when designing an auditorium is the relationship between the actors and the audience. In proscenium theater, the actor's performance on the stage is viewed as a picture of a two-dimensional form because the audience cannot see the backside of the action. The scenographer must arrange the setting more pictorially than spatially. The lines of communication most of the time flow only in one direction rather than multiple directions. This line is from the actor to the audience and stage to auditorium. There are several elements that one will encounter when dealing with a proscenium stage, proscenium arch, stage floor, with the possibility of a trap, apron, offstage space, orchestra pit, back wall of theater, grand drape, main curtain, second portal, gridiron, fly gallery, backdrop, cut crop, cyclorama, scenic unit, ground row, footlights, light batten suspended from the grid, and front of house and lighting positions.
Black box flexible theater. It is a large room with 4 walls and does not have permanent seating arrangement or permanent stage. The space can be turned into proscenium, thrust arena stage by the arrangement of the portable seating. The acting area, stage, can be arranged according to the needs of the production. This type of theater does not have flying system or traps, and it is economical to produce plays in black box flexible theater.
Design procedure. Conduct text analysis and interpretation of the play. Determine dramatic understanding and design approach. Research the cast, characters, and actions. Research the dramatic and scenic requirements. Research and discuss directorial concepts and approaches. Research and determine production demands. Research and determine the style of presentation. Research and determine the technical demands. Research and determine the number of settings, types of stage arrangements. Research and determine unit settings, multiple scenery, or simultaneous scenery. Research and determine the shifting methods and problems. Research and determine the actors and actions requirements. Research stage and house equipment, physical limitations, size, shape, and space. Examine and be familiar with the scene shop and its equipments. Examine the shop relationship to the stage. The shop size, painting facility, and safety procedures. Be aware of shop's power tools staff capability. Be aware of storage areas and backstage space. Be aware of available equipments, scenery, props, lighting, and multimedia. Examine auditorium or house seating and sight lines. Research historical source materials. Development of the design idea and ground plan. Final design and ground plan. Design sketches and models. Designers to scale plans and elevations. Selection and design of properties. Scenic painting technique and painter's elevations. Dressing the scenery, touch-ups, and adjustments. Text analysis. Text, dramatic structure and style, period, time, and locale. The time frames within the text, the spatial framework of the text. The visual assumptions of the playwright as written in text. The period and social background of the playwright's world as written in text. The period and social background is found from research materials. The playwright's underlying assumptions as found from careful study of text. Stage space, production requirements, and physical limitations of the theater and stage. Integration of conceptual approach and style of all elements of the production. Production requirement, space, visual, practical, technological. Character and actions analysis. Actions and scene development and space requirements of the play. Visual expression interpretation, integration, and practical applications. Organization, technical, budget, and labor. Development of metaphor, visual master symbol. Metaphor is the master symbol and the discovery and presentation of the visual communication that trigger emotional responses and abstract meanings expressive to the mood and theme of the drama. Metaphors perceived inherent in the text. Many visual theater artists find it productive to put their thoughts into short statements that detail in words visually important features found in the study of a text. Visual research includes chronological and psychological research of text, directorial concepts and approaches, characters, actions, and elements of the production. Dramatic visual communication, master simple, metaphor. Visualization process, visual sensation, thinking, seeing, and fitting it into a rational context, feeling emotional response to the visual image, intuition, unconscious assessment of image, of past experience applied to future experience. Demands of scenic design and scenographic art. Place and locale. Where is the action in the set? Time and period. Night, day, season, year, span of time. Theme. Point certain visual ideas. Mood. The emotional tone climax of the play. Scenic. Costume, lighting, special effects. Style and production concepts and style. Social status and genre of the characters. Wealthy, poor, who inhibits the setting. The space and type of actions, movement, and the position of actors and actresses, determined by the drama, ballet, dance, comedy, musical, or opera production. Entrances and exits and other space scenic arrangements. Furniture and scenic elements. Props, scenic, hands, and costumes. Changing scenery, method, and timing. Stage, play requirements and space composition. Technical methods and operation. Physical descriptions and limitations of stage and theater. Requirements of stage scenery. Expressive to the dramatic action of the play. Creative, original, new vision or concept. Accommodating and practical. Attractiveness. Objective and meaningful. Achieve unity with other elements of the production. Supportive to actors and actions. Scenographer's physical influences. Floor pattern, composition, and level changes. Objects used directly in the action of the production. Barriers that restrict and direct the flow of performers' actions. Scenic elements and objects that have a visual influence on the audience, but not a direct influence on the performer. Light and special effects on the physical form. Elements and principles of design and visual art. The designer's effective use of elements of design is essential to create the illusion of depth to express motion and direction of movement. The designer's use of horizontal, vertical, diagonal, or a combination of lines can determine the compositional value of the design. The designer's use of horizontal lines to suggest quietness, restfulness. Vertical lines suggest force, loftiness, and activity. And diagonal lines to suggest action, excitement, and conflict. Also, lines moving in a circle suggest unity. Curved lines suggest gracefulness and easy, comfortable feeling, and sharp angular lines suggest tension and conflict. The designer can use various forms to create 2- and 3-dimensional shapes, as well as color, with its hue, values, and intensity, to create visual, psychological, and emotional effects. Employment of contrast is produced by the use of texture to create patterns of different quality and of surfaces of different materials or objects. The designer's ability to utilize the physical and dramatic space is to create 3-dimensional volume. Balance, symmetrical or asymmetrical compositions can be achieved by equal distribution of line, shape, size, color, texture, and placement. The use of proportion in the relation of each element, including size, form, color, and the design, must relate and complement each other. An effective design composition would include achievement of emphasis or center of interest, appropriate rhythm, sense of movement, and dynamic composition. Design basics. Unity. By repetition of shape. Continuation, line, edge of direction. Variety and tapestry. Emphasis or focal point. Emphasis by contrast. Emphasis by isolation. Emphasis by placement. Balance. Symmetrical balance. Balance of color. Balance of value. Balance of texture. Balance of perception. Balance by eye direction. Radical balance. Balance by pattern. Scale and proportion. Human proportion. Object proportion. Illusion of space. Depth, size, overlapping, transparency, perspective. Rhythm. Every part must have a logical and pleasing development from other parts. This may be created by repetition, opposition, gradation, transition, radiation. Balance. Obtains a sense of rest. Weights are not the only means of balance. Thrust and color may also achieve balance. Formal and symmetrical. Occult. Satisfies the eye as to equal value in the design without being exactly alike and radical, revolving around a center point. Therefore, elements of design can be classified into two basic categories. 1. Spatial elements of design, which include line, shape, mass, measure, position, and proportion. 2. The superficial elements of design, which include value and texture. Together, these elements affect the contrast, balance, and rhythm of scenery. They create shape, they create rhythm, simulate texture, create the illusion of depth, express motion and the direction of movement, horizontal, vertical, diagonal, or a combination. Line, the basic unit of design. Line indicates position and direction. As a result of experience, lines of certain direction and quality have appropriated certain psychological effects. In each such apparent direction of movement, line carries with it a sense of mood. But the quality of a line, even more than its direction, can arouse emotional status. Tranquility and assurance when a line runs firmly and smoothly. Emphatic assertion when it becomes alternately thin and thick. Nervous apprehension and irritability when it splinters and breaks into jagged bits. Dreamy reverie when it doubles and blurs. Defiance and rage when it jerks about abruptly and changes direction. Some effects of the line are emotional. Thus a line may seem bold, delicate, nervous, or uncertain, depending on the manner it is drafted as well as its direction. Quality of line. Light, delicate, refined, tend to recede. Heavy, strong, overconfident, tend to advance. Kind of line. The psychological effect and mood. Horizontal lines suggest quietness, restful, stable, repose, and breadth. Vertical lines suggest farce, loftiness, activity, dignity, stability, tallness, and balance. Diagonal lines suggest action, excitement, transition, unbalance, movement and conflict, dynamic and unsolved tendencies. Lines moving in circles suggest unity, convey psychological qualities. Curved lines show gracefulness, ease, and sensuousness. Sharp curved line, playful, unpredictable, comic, romance. Jagged lines suggest tension, excitement, conflict, harshness, irritable, and tragic. Oppositional lines strongly oppose each other through the meeting of perpendicular lines. Transitional lines, adding a third line, the abruptness of oppositional lines. Form and shape. 2 or 3-dimensional shapes in space or plane enclosed by a line is delineated by lines suggest a state of the boundaries of an area that has dimensions up and down, side by side, but no apparent thickness. It is a flat area or plane. Color. Colors express visual, psychological, and emotional reactions. Colors convey harmony, mood, dramatization of actor environments. Hue, value, and intensity are the quality of color. Texture. Patterns to produce contrast and surface. Texture is a surface quality of material or object. May also include such visually perceived qualities as shininess, dullness, or brightness. Space. Space design can be in 2 or in 3-dimensional volume through the use of size, scale, overlapping, transparency, and perspective. Balance. Established visual weight and equal distribution of line, shape, size, color, texture, and placement of scenic units. Balance of symmetrical and asymmetrical. Balance occurs when opposing forces neutralize each other. This may occur when equal forces are opposed or it is an adjustment of unequal forces. The opposing forces may be objects acquiring similar or differing emphasis as a result of contrast or some other visual effect. Symmetrical balance is usually illustrated with identical objects placed equidistant from the fulcrum. The effect of such balance is static and rigid. It imparts an effect of great dignity. Symmetrical balance is easily comprehended. Occult or asymmetrical balance occurs when one balancing form assumes some special quality or attraction to make up for not being a mere reversal of image, so placed as to balance another form. Special quality may be an increase or decrease in measure, value, intensity, or an adjustment in some other manner that will increase the emphasis on that form. The effect of asymmetrical balance is dynamic and easily sensed by the viewer. Proportion. It is a term used to describe the relationships of height, width, depth, and surrounding space or forms. Any one dimension is by itself neither right nor wrong. When dimensions are placed together, however, relationships are established, and it is these relationships that we judge. Proportion is not just a consideration of measure or of intervals. It can be linked to the reason or function of a visual form. The proportion of a chair, as a visual form for example, depends upon how it's used. A simple dining room side chair is small when compared to the scale and grandeur of a canopied throne chair. Thus, the spatial elements of design relate to the placement, dimensions, and physical relationship of objects in space and those same qualities of the space itself. The superficial surface elements of design affect the appearance of the surfaces of objects or the surface of the composition as a whole. These are the elements of texture and tone. Every plane has texture, that element deriving from the physical quality of a work which gives to the plane, whether it is the surface of an object, the picture plane of a sketch, rendering, or painting, or the picture plane of a stage setting, thus giving the composition as a unit, its own peculiar feel appealing to the tactile sense, smooth, rough, slippery, granular, hard, soft, or whatever. Emphasis. The center focus of the design, a point of interest, a focal point to attract attention, and can be achieved by the application of lines, colors, sizes, forms, and placement of these elements. Rhythm. Sense of movement and feeling of a definite composition in space. Repetition and emphasis are important in creating rhythm in a composition. Graphic art is a regularity of changes in a regularity of measure with the effect of movement on our minds. The recurrence of stress or accent, which produces rhythm, may be secured in many ways. A color note may be distributed throughout a painting or a decorative design. The parts of a design may be placed alternately, big, little, and so on. They may occur in sequence, like big, middle-sized, small. Such gradations of sizes or shapes can become quite elaborate and still count as a single rhythmic stress if the parts making up the series hang together in units, more or less complete, and you sense the repetition of such units. Rhythm moves three-dimensionally as well as in two dimensions. Light. Light and dark qualities in an object and or effects achieved through technical devices, i.e. lighting instruments. Unity or harmony. The presentation of a unified image within the stage design and other elements of the production. Costumes, lighting, props, sound, and special effects. Composition. The aim is to create variety and unity in dynamic scenic environment as the result of manipulating all elements of design. Mass. Mass is the quantity of matter and frequently has some basic form, usually geometric, cube, triangle, oval, and so forth. This element is three-dimensional, either actual or illusionary. Measure. In theatrical productions, it is commonly believed that certain positions on the stage have a stronger psychological impact than on other positions. Dividing the acting into 9 spaces, the descending order of strength is down center, center, up center, down right, down left, right center, up right, and up left. Height also adds emphasis. Elevating a unit has the potential of strengthening the psychological impact of that unit without regard to its location in a specific acting area. The location of a form is referred as its position to the physical placement of a unit, a line, shape, or mass in the picture plane, which in a proscenium theater is usually the curtain line. Besides the comparative weight and the interval between the shapes, their position in relationship to one another, the composition as a whole, the quality identified as attitude, has an effect upon the whole. Value. It is one of the 3 constituents of color, the other two being hue and intensity. Hue refers to the quality due to the predominance of some one of the wavelengths which make up white light, indicates the degree of lightness or darkness of a tone. Arthur Pope uses the tone to refer to three factors: value, hue, and intensity. In synthesis, combining hue and intensity as inseparable factors of color and value as a related factor of tone. Hue and intensity should not be considered in this study due to the lack of descriptive resource materials. Intensity. This term is used to indicate the selection and application of colors, shadows, and highlights, and the strength of the hue as distinguished from neutrality. Contrast may be simply defined as the difference in the field of vision which reveal form. Contrast may be the result of subtle or gross differences in any one object or between objects of one or several of the elements of design discussed above. Too little contrast in a composition will result in monotony and an inability to distinguish form. Too much contrast will result in chaos. Spatial composition, sculpting of space. The spatial and superficial elements of design are usually present in all designs and all conceptions of settings by designers. At times, one element or one group of elements may dominate the visual effect of the composition. Ultimately, these elements will affect the rhythm, contrast, and balance of the setting on all types and forms of stage space, including proscenium, thrust, arena, and flexible or open stages. And they're used to 1. Manipulate elements of design. 2. Development of the design idea. 3. Actor, action, space design, images, and environment. 4. Practical technological application of the visual elements of the design. 5. Plans and three-dimensional structures. Staging the living atmosphere for the performance. The implementation of the above in expressive visual and dramatic presentations must enforce the action, support the actors, and psychologically and visually manipulate the audience's emotion for the proper dramatic impact of the play. Types of stage settings. 1. Multiple scenery. Using more than one individual sets. A basic rule for productions with multiple sets is that all the settings should be one scenic style or overall unity. Sometimes when the action takes place in numerous locales, covers a time span, flashbacks, or when sets are made in different periods, there can be different style sets that these sceneries can be changed throughout the play. 2. Simultaneous scenery. Setting is more clearly representative of locales in the play, interior and exterior. This type of set is used for plays that are made up of short scenes with frequent shifts of locations. Although only one section of the acting area is used for each scene, all of the sets are visible throughout the performance. In order to use this type, the designer must design the set so that A. Scenery change isn't too long and involved. B. Enough stage space. C. Audience ability to see all individual sets. D. Each set is independently lighted. E. Overall settings have unity and are visually pleasing. Uses one specific permanent set that is used in many scenes. Although the same set is used, furniture, props, and changes in lighting can be used to alter the set. A unit set may be used to give the production unity, strength, and for rapid and smooth scenery changes. Because of budget limitations and time, it is apparent that whatever settings are used, it has to function in nature and design. Formal scenery, permanent. To suggest the style and atmosphere of the play, providing a variety of acting levels and areas, but not recreating any particular place. Little emphasis on actual place. 4. Unit scenery. Employs several basic scenic elements which usually remain on stage during the entire production, but are turned, moved about, and combined with a variety of other scenic elements to alter the appearance of the settings. Platforms with facade, flying units, etc. 5. Fully shifted scenery. By flying or rolling and requires careful planning and timing of shifting. Quality of color. Color is a visual quality distinct from light and shade. Color theorists consider that three variants or qualities are part of this general term color. These qualities are hue, value, and intensity. The subordinate qualities are tint, tone, and shade. Black, white, and gray are not considered colors, nor are they qualities. Every color has either warmth or coolness. Hue. Hue is the name of a color, the spectral notion of light. There are three types of hues: pigment colors, colors in light, and colors in vision. Primary hues are those which cannot be obtained by mixing any other colors. In painting, the primary colors are considered to be blue, yellow, and red. The secondary colors are considered to be those hues that can be obtained by mixing two primaries. Red and yellow produce orange, yellow and blue produce green, and blue and red produce violet. Intermediate hues are those colors obtained by mixing adjacent secondary and primary colors. Within hue there is contrast between warm and cool colors. The reds, oranges, and yellows, plus their derivatives, are considered warm. Blues, blue-violets, blue-greens, plus other hues that have a greater proportion of blue than red or yellow, are considered to be cool. This, too, is a quality of color. Value. Value is the quality of color that is its light-to-dark variation. A hue can be raised in value by the addition of white, and value can be lowered by the addition of black. There are approximately 7 visible steps of gradation from white to black on a value scale. Black and white are not technically considered colors. They are only degrees of lightness and darkness. All color is between these two poles. Intensity. Intensity is the quality of relative grayness in colors. A pure hue, the exact shade of the physical spectrum, has the highest intensity. The grayness in a color is the neutralization effect of that hue's complement. The addition of green to red, in theory, will produce gray. The proportion of each complement present will determine whether the color is a low-intensity red or low-intensity green. Intensity is a property of color. Black and white have no intensity. Mixing them with a hue involves a subordinate quality of color. Tint. Tint is the mixing of hue, hereafter referred in the function as the key, with white. Tints unify a group of colors placed together, are either warm or cool. If the dominant quality of the colors in question is warm, a yellow tint will effectively draw the colors together. A blue tint will unify predominantly cool colors. Shade. Shade is the mixing of a hue, the key, with black. Shades produce a richness of color and the illusion of depth. There is no white nor pastels in this quality. The hues retain their warmth or coolness, but gain a somber feeling. Tone. Tone is the mixing of the key with white and black. Also mixing the key with gray produces tone. So tone is a step in the series of gradations produced when complements are combined. The development of style in scenic design. Naturalism. Naturalistic style has emerged as a reaction to historical, intellectual, philosophical, social, and theatrical conditions present during the mid-19th century. Naturalism is a representational style, and its aim is photographic objectivity rather than imaginative selectivity in duplicating the details of real life on stage. It emphasizes the scientific treatment of man and his environment, particularly a lower-class environment. The scenic designers attempted to reproduce life on stage in an untouched, objective fashion and methodically added every detail of life to reach that end. Realism. Realistic scenery is based on authentic source materials as seen through the designer's eyes, but the details have been carefully selected and some of them have been exaggerated in size and scale for greater theatrical effectiveness. Realistic scenery may appear as though it were taken from real life. Since it is the literature itself that sets the pattern for all phases of a production, it is not surprising that realism has remained the dominant force in playwriting of the 20th century, and through visual elements such as scenic design, costumes, lighting, and makeup, should reflect these variations and modifications and remain basically realistic. Pictorial realism. The emphasis is placed on the compositional qualities of the setting rather than a faithful depiction of realistic details, and expressive color harmonies and use of line, form, and mass. The simplification of detail makes it easily appreciated by the audience. Such designs employ symmetrical balance and an obvious use of motif or pattern when these elements are carefully adjusted. The result is an effective arrangement of space and area relationships. The creative treatment of pictorial realism is achieved by the simplification of detail, emphasizing the compositional treatment with great economy of detail. Suggestive realism. This style allows a part to stand for the whole. It is the simplification of a realistic setting by elimination of all unnecessary detail. A suggestive realism stage design that has been created on the stage that the first look at seems almost complete in its details. Designers find suggestive realism both flexible and a challenging style in which to work. The elimination of all unnecessary details from the setting forces the designer to put greater reliance on imagination, arrangement, and pure design in handling the few features he or she retains. Selective realism. This style can be created in fragmentary scenic design or profile scenery treatment, depends on how the designer selects the focal or dominant object and how it is treated to complement the other elements of the design composition. The designer's intention to put greater emphasis on his imagination and reduce or eliminate much of the details has made the design process for this style more creative and visually appealing. Realistic stylization. Presentations of reality with exaggerations of color, line, mass, and maintaining the original shape recognizable but in exaggerated application. This type works very well for musicals and dance productions. Impressionism. Impressionistic style in theater design is actually a subdivision of the more general late 19th century style called symbolism. The goal of Impressionism in theatrical design is to emphasize the actions or feelings of a scene through its scenery. It uses less detail to suggest various locations and emotions of the play. A combination of various visual images creates a dramatic illusion. Impressionism is an abstraction of reality. It singles out a part of reality in order to indicate the whole idea. It uses vague symbols to suggest reality. Lights and shows express the illusion of objects. The goal of Impressionism in plays is the use of scenery to communicate the designer's ideas to the audience by playing on their moods and emotions. It allows the audience to create out of their own experiences and imaginations any detail that they don't see directly on stage. Expressionism. Near the end of the 19th century, the style of Expressionism in theater was initiated. It is conveying man's inner thought and feelings in dramatic terms that could be understood and appreciated by the audience. The designer, in his creative effort, is forced away from any reference to recorded facts and must rely on his imagination and attempt to convey the same expression of truth as that employed by the dramatist to express human emotion by visual means and emphasize distortion and/or abstraction. Expressionistic scenic design style can be utilized by careful application of all the elements of the visual arts of the theater, such as color, light, music, rhythm, and projected images, multimedia, 2- or 3-dimensional scenery, and special effects. The style and application of the visual and technological treatment may be clearly evident from the total emotional impact when the action takes place on the stage. Absurd or abstract. As the reality with which the theater of the absurd is concerned, It is a psychological reality expressed in images that are the outward projection of states of mind, fears, dreams, nightmares, and conflicts within the personality of the characters to create an illusion of reality under severe tension. The creative atmosphere in the absurd theater illustrates elements that relate to the subconscious mind of the characters as they deal with their dilemmas, displaying the simple, boring anxieties and fantasies of the humans to the extreme. Absurdist uses rhythm of manners, the plot remains unfocused. The dialogue continues but says nothing. A rhythm pattern develops, swinging back and forth from normal to absurd, no decisions made. The absurd theater exposes human limitations with the free use of time, space, metaphysical language, and expressive imagery. Human obsessions and weaknesses concerning moral or philosophical issues are brought forth in a simple, grotesque realism under stress. Futurism or Surrealism. Futurism and or Surrealism style was actively practiced in Italy between 1910 and 1950 and support the idea of the use of all the expressive visual means in multimedia in theatrical production to reconstruct the past through confrontation and creation of endless illusion.